enjoy that. And so today I want to start off with a few questions. I'm going to put some images on a screen. I need your help to make some decisions this morning, okay? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put up two pictures of two people, and I'm going to ask a question. And if you would pick the one on your right, on this side, on your right, then I want you to stand up. And I may ask you why you made that particular decision, all right? And if you can't stand, you can always just raise your hand and say, I'm on that. I want the one on the right, okay? So here we go, slide one. Who would you rather be your substitute teacher? All right, would you rather Iron Man or Loki be your substitute teacher? All right, the one on the right or the one on the left? If you think Loki, stand up, okay? All right, tell me why. Tell me why. Why Loki? Why would you choose?
He knows more about failure, and he seems to be very knowledgeable about plans.
He is very knowledgeable about plans. Yeah. All right, I got that. All right, someone for Iron Man. Who chose Iron Man? Why would you choose Iron Man? Come on, tell me. Why would you choose Iron Man? You guys just didn't want to stand up, did you? Is that what happened? Why did you choose Iron Man?
Okay, so a couple reasons. He's literally like a billionaire.
He is a billionaire.
That
That is true.
money doesn't make him happy.
Yeah.
But like he probably, since he's a billionaire, he could probably buy the entire.
Yeah. I think both of them would be worthless substitute teachers that would teach you nothing, just so you know. Like Loki would be so concerned about himself that he wouldn't teach the class, he'd ditch you and do something else. Iron Man, he's like, I'm not teaching a bunch of kids, and he would totally ditch you just because he's got $1 billion and wants to go fly on his airplane or something, all right? All right, what about this one? Who would you pick to be your new basketball coach? Hulk or Darth Vader? Who would you want to be your basketball coach? Who is this? If you think it's Hulk or Darth Vader, stand up. I don't... Yeah. It's a few Hulks. Everyone else is Darth Vader. I want to hear your reasoning for Darth Vader. Why would you say, I want Darth Vader to be my basketball coach? You got something, Landon?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's for sure Darth Vader. Yeah. That Hulk is incoherent. Like, Darth Vader's not a great guy, but he's mentally there.
And, like, I thought about this, too, a little bit, because, like, let's say, Hulk's getting frustrated with your team. Everyone would know, right? Like, because he would turn into the big, giant green monster, okay? But Darth Vader, if you're, like, starting to lose, he could use the Force to, like, choke people out on the other team or, like, direct the basketball into the goal. Like, so I can see it, either way. Okay. All right, next one. Who would make the best community group leader? Ultron or Captain America? Ultron or Captain America? Ultron, Captain America. All right. All right. What do we think? So a lot of Captain America fans. Okay. Someone tell me why Captain America? Why Captain America? Why would you choose Captain America? You guys? He is a Superman. That's right. He's a super soldier. And just a nice guy, right? He is just a nice guy. Ultron, scary, creepy, all right? Like I just got destroyed by a robot kind of guy. Okay, all right. Although I would say this, Ultron would know all the right answers, right?
He will kill you.
But he will kill you. Yeah. All right. Who would make the best boss at like your after-school job? Spider-Man or Kylo Ren? The best boss in your job. If you had a job after school, who's the best boss? I don't know what the job is. You'd say Spider-Man. Spider-Man. I'd probably agree with you on that one. Spider-Man. Okay. Yes, I intentionally chose the picture because of that, whatever that was. Yes, okay. All right, slide. All right, here we go. Who would you pick to chaperone you and your friends on spring break? Thanos or Thor? Who would you go on a spring break trip with? All right? You guys say Thanos, Thanos, Thanos. All right, Hayden, tell me why you choose Thanos. Oh, you picked Thor? Oh, sorry. Why would you pick Thor? Why would you pick Thor? Just like him. Thor does know how to throw a good party. In the movies, at least. All right. Why would you pick Thanos? Seems like a nice guy. All right. You guys can sit down. I don't know if you've ever noticed this before, but movies actually give us the best and worst pictures of powerful people. I mean, rarely in a movie there's not anybody in the middle. There's not a so-so powerful person. It's either they're incredibly evil and powerful or incredibly good and powerful. And that's probably just because it would be a really boring movie to watch someone who had somewhat power but not really, just do kind of stuff, right? I think they call those romantic comedies, all right? But anyways, it's just one of those things that it just kind of makes for a boring movie. And so we kind of gravitate towards powerful people to two extremes. And last week we began talking about this idea of power, and specifically how we all have powerful people in our lives, people in positions of leadership, people in authority. And just like in the movies, sometimes those people are amazing people that we respect, that we honor, that we find helpful, that are encouraging. And even though you may not be happy with all the stuff that they ask of you, you still respect them, and you follow them, and you trust them, and you like them. But at the same time, we know how it feels to have a person in authority who seems like, they really shouldn't be in authority, right? Like they kind of fall on the other end of the spectrum. And the question I want us to wrestle with today is this: what do you do when people in authority don't lead like Jesus led? Like when they're evil or when their actions are bad. Like what do you do when a leader is lazy or disrespectful or wrong? Or maybe they're not a Christian, or maybe they don't deserve the power or the authority that they have. Like what about the teacher who seems to care less about students and more about just kind of protecting their job or test scores? Or what about the boss who makes decisions that you don't agree with and they unfairly treat other people and some of their other employees? Or what about the adult in your life who talks about being Christian but talks bad about everyone else outside of services? What do you do in those moments? And I guess the question I want to get at today is this one right here. You can see it up on the screen. Are we required to be good followers of bad leaders? Like, are we required to be good followers of bad leaders? Like, does God want me to follow someone who isn't kind or selfless or respectable, but follow them just because they're in authority? Or is it okay to ignore them and not do what they say? Is it a really big deal if I talk bad about them or behind their back? If the person is a bad leader, do I have to be a good follower? And this is a really good question with some really difficult answers. Because I would imagine at some point in time, you've been under the authority of a bad leader. And dealing with people in authority who don't live up to their responsibility, I'm just going to tell you, you will always deal with that. That will always come into your life, even as an adult. It never goes away, because the truth is, we will always have people in our lives that are an authority over us. Go ahead and put that up on the screen. We'll always have people in our lives that are an authority over us. And I'm so thankful that God has shown us how we should respond to people even when they're a bad authority in our lives. And so we're going to look at a passage of Scripture that actually comes from the Old Testament, the very first part of the Bible that existed before Jesus. It revolves around a guy named David. And he would eventually become king of this nation. But before David was ever king, he actually had a lot of experience with some bad authority that was in his life. You see, as a kid, David's dad overlooked him. In fact, God would send the prophet Samuel to David's family, and Samuel was arriving for the very purpose of anointing the next king of Israel, because God had told him, you need to go to Jesse's house, you need to anoint the next king. And so Samuel arrives, he tells David's dad, hey, bring all your sons before me, I want to see which one God has chosen. Well, David's dad, because David was the youngest, he was like, you need to go watch the sheep out in the field because one of your brothers is going to be king. Like, how would that make you feel in your family, right? You wouldn't feel super great about your father in that moment. And so David gets sent out. Samuel goes through all the boys, and he's like, none of these are what God has chosen to be king of Israel. And so he's like, do you have anybody else? And David's dad's like, no, there's that one other one. He's around here somewhere. And so then they bring in David. And Samuel's like, this is the one that's going to be king, right? That's not a great authority figure from a parent to leave your son out of potentially being king just because you kind of rule him out in the first place. And so then what happens, that's kind of interesting, is David is anointed king, but he's not king yet. There was another person that was already king over Israel, and his name was King Saul. And here's where the rub kind of comes in. Saul didn't want to leave. He didn't want to give up power. He eventually heard about David, and he was like, you know what? I want to protect my throne. And so he chose to pursue David and try to kill him. And so what do you do when you have an evil king coming after you? You run. Like, that's what happens, okay? You run because he's got like troops and people and archers, all this kind of stuff that come after you. And so for years, David is running for his life. And that's where we pick up actually in this story in 1 Samuel 24. You guys can follow along on the screen. Here's what it says. It says, after Saul returned from fighting the Philistines, which was a neighboring nation, he was told that David had gone into the wilderness of En-Gedi, which is just a specific spot. And so Saul chose 3,000 elite troops from all of Israel and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the wild goats. At the place where the road passed some sheepfolds, Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. But as it happened, David and his men were hiding further back in that very cave. Can you feel the tension building in this story? And just in case you're wondering, you did hear that right. Saul took 3,000 troops of all over Israel to hunt down David because Saul was the type of leader that was actually jealous of someone else's success around them. You know, David, before this, he was actually the guy who defeated Goliath, which was a literal giant. So he became very famous in the nation where people supported him. And so Saul is chasing after him. He's jealous of him. And then on the way, Saul's like, hey guys, I need a bathroom break. So he walks over to a cave, goes into the cave, not knowing that David is in the cave with some of his men hidden back in the dark, deep crevices, back there. And so Saul's going in, and let's just be honest, it's hard to do anything else when you're using the bathroom, right? Like, you can't defend yourself. It's just like, whatever, all right? So Saul's there. He's getting ready. He's using the bathroom. And David's men are there, and listen to what David's men say. This is verses 3 and 4. It says, now's your opportunity. David's men whispered to him, today the Lord is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish. In other words, they're saying, David, go take him out. Take him out right now. Seriously, he can't do anything. He's using the bathroom. Like, go stab him. That's what they're saying, right? They're saying in this moment that, David, you should go take him out. Years you've been fleeing from this guy. You are the rightful king of Israel. God has anointed you. Samuel anointed you. You were told that you're going to be king, and this evil king is here right now, and all of your problems will be over, David, if you just go and take out Saul. So here's what happens. Verse 4. So David crept forward and cut off his piece of the hem of Saul's robe, all right? Is what he cut off. And you're like, what? Like, why would you do that, David? You're so close. Just give him like a little, chop his head off or arm or something, all right? Just show him that you were there. All of David's guys were like, he's going to do it. He's going to do it. What is he doing? I can imagine the confusion in that moment. This was supposed to be the day when David got his revenge, stopped hiding, became king, but that's not what happened. In fact, Saul would leave the cave without ever even knowing that David was there. And while David could have stayed hidden, instead he ran after Saul out of the cave to get his attention, and he showed him the piece of cloth in his hand at that moment. And at that moment, Saul knew that David had spared his life. And what David said next kind of explains it all. Here's what he said, verses 12 through 15. David said, may the Lord judge between us. Perhaps the Lord will punish you for what you are trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. As that old proverb says, from evil people come evil deeds. So you can be sure I will never harm you. Who is the king of Israel trying to catch anyway? Should he spend his time chasing one who is as worthless as a dead dog or a single flea? In other words, who am I that you're choosing to chase after me? May the Lord therefore judge which of us is right and punish the guilty one. He is my advocate, and he will rescue me from your power. David could have taken Saul down right then and there. And if we're being honest, he probably had good reason to do it, because multiple times Saul had tried to kill him. In fact, one time he threw a spear at David and tried to pin him against the wall, but David was able to get out of that situation. But what David realized is even though Saul was king, David could choose the role that he played in the story. And he quotes this old proverb. He says, "From evil people come evil deeds." And basically he's saying, evil people do evil things. And King Saul, you may do evil things, but I will not follow your example. I will not stoop to the evil that you're doing. So no matter how evil you are towards me, hunting me down, I will not choose revenge against you. He wouldn't stoop to Saul's level. Saul was definitely wrong, definitely a bad authority. But David chose how he would respond to this evil authority that was over him. And this is what's tricky about God's upside down kingdom. Because God asks you as a follower of Jesus to respond in a way that's very different than how our culture would respond. And so in the upside down kingdom, here's how I want to phrase it. Honor is greater than power. We actually see this elsewhere in the Bible. In the New Testament, when Christians were actually being persecuted under a government authority that said it's illegal to be Christian. If you're going to be a Christian, guess what? You're going to be persecuted. And you may be strung up, like they would string them up on poles, and they would light the Christians on fire to light their gardens as the Roman authorities, or as the authorities would walk around their gardens. Like this is what would happen to Christians in this passage. But it also echoes what happened in David's time. So in 1 Peter 2:15, it says this. It says, "It is God's will that your honorable lives should silence those ignorant people who make foolish accusations against you. For you are free, yet you are God's slaves. So don't use your freedom as an excuse to do evil. Respect everyone. Love the family of believers. Love the church. Fear God. And respect the king." In other words, live such an honorable life that when people talk about you, their words are silenced by how you live. Don't use your freedom to get revenge or to do evil. Instead, respect or honor everyone, including the people in authority over you, the government, or including the people in authority that like your parents or your teachers or your coaches. And see, we have this opportunity in front of us of how we respond to those who are in authority over this. Like we can choose to be honorable and to honor the authority, like no matter what's going on around us, their actions, whether they're good or bad, don't have to determine our response. Instead, we can choose to respond with honor. Now, this comes with a tough, like, okay, Kevin, are you saying that if I have a bad authority over me, that I need to obey them? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you need to honor them. There's a difference. Does it mean we always need to comply, always need to give in? No. Like David ran for his life. If he would have obeyed Saul, he would be dead, right? Because Saul would be like, "David, stand there." And like nailed him with something, and David would be cut in half, all right? That's what would happen if David would have obeyed. But he didn't obey. David ran for his life, but David still chose to honor even in his disobedience. He wouldn't become like the person he was running from. Most of you, I would imagine, won't find yourself in a situation where you're running from an evil king for your life. Like we just don't have that in our country, right? It's not something that is happening right now. But you will find yourself in situations where those in authority over you are not using their authority in good and healthy ways. And there will be times in life, go ahead and put this up on the screen. There will be times in life when you have to be honorable to an authority, but not obey. There'll be times when you need to honor the person, but humbly and respectfully say, "No, I'm not going to do that." Honoring a bad authority means you still treat them with respect, but you speak with truth about what is unfair or unjust or wrong. Honoring bad authority means you choose to listen to them, but you won't obey them to do something that is actually sinful that God has said, "Do not do this." And it takes an unreal amount of wisdom and discernment to figure out, how do I honor a bad authority in my life while still protecting myself and standing up for the truth? And I would encourage you that if you find yourself in that situation with a coach or a teacher or another adult in your life where you're like, I don't know how to navigate this because the authority that's in my life right now, like they're asking me to do things that are wrong or they're just not a good authority, I would encourage you, find a trusted adult to talk with about that and say, how can I honor them while still standing for the truth and protecting myself? Like most of the time, I think this is true, most of the time, teachers, coaches, your parents are not going to ask you to do something illegal or wrong. Like most of the time. But there will be times when their actions are not great, right? And I think we've all probably experienced that. There'll be times when you'll be frustrated with them, times when you feel like they could be better. And in those moments, the most important thing that you can do is decide who you want to be in response to that. Not whether they deserve power or how they deserve to be treated. In other words, you can choose to show honor no matter who is in authority. Go ahead and put that on the screen. You can choose to show honor no matter who is in authority. So the truth is, we all know that this is easier said than done, right? Like this works really well in practice, but when you get in the middle of a situation like this, it is crazy hard to figure out, how do I do this? And I'm going to tell you, the situations get harder as you get older because all of a sudden it's like, I could be fired for speaking up against this, but it's wrong. So how do I go about addressing, dealing with, working in this situation? So to wrap up our time today, I just want to look at some ways that you can be honorable no matter who's powerful. So the very first one, I want to say this, and these are simpler than what you think. First, I want you to do this. Think about what you say and how you say it. Like whether you're talking to a teacher, a parent, a coach, or someone else in authority, you can speak in a way that gives respect to them. And if you must argue with them, like let's say you're arguing with your stepmom, you can argue in such a way that is calm, that uses words to find solutions, not to find ways to make the other person look bad or horrible, but put simply, your words are a choice and you choose to honor someone with your words, even if you don't agree with them. And just as important is all your nonverbal communication, right? Because sometimes we can say two different things, but we're saying the same exact words, right? Like if you walk up to somebody and you're like, your hair looks nice today. You know, that means something else, right? As opposed to, your hair looks nice today. You know, I don't know. That probably means the same thing. I don't know. But like you got to watch your nonverbal communication, right? Because you can say the same thing but mean two different things with them. So honor them with your words, honor them with your actions. But number two, this. Remember they're human too. It's easy to see powerful people as not real, but they are humans. Coaches are going to make bad calls on the field. Teachers are going to make mistakes where they give out homework that has no right answer to it, right? Have you ever had that mistake where the math problem that you worked on for 4 hours and the teacher's like, oh yeah, that shouldn't be like that. Sorry. And you're like, I hate you so much. You know, like in your mind, you're just like all of a sudden angry with this person. All right, they're going to mess up. Bosses will get it wrong. And in those moments, you can respond honorably by treating them the way you would want to be treated in your own mistakes, in your own messes. Number three, I'll tell you this. When you have an authority over your life that you need to honor but not obey, speak up. Like we mentioned before, sometimes the best way to be honorable is to speak up, especially if you're not safe or you're being hurt or what's being asked of you isn't right or healthy. Knowing when to speak up or find the right words, this can be tricky, and this is why I want to encourage you to talk with a trusted adult about this. How do I honor someone but not obey them? And this could be a way that it could be thinking through what's best for you, and that person can help guide you through a situation like this. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need to speak up to a powerful person, I want you to make a plan for what that conversation looks like. Because if you walk in and you're like, I need to speak up, and you haven't thought about what to say and run it by somebody else, I'm just telling you, it's probably not going to go well, right? It's just not going to go well. So the thing to remember in all this is that God is inviting us to participate in his upside-down kingdom in a totally different way of seeing power in this world, because honor is actually greater than power. And you see this actually in the life of Jesus. Jesus actually modeled this for us. Like, he honored power even as he was going to the cross. When he stood before Pilate, the very person who had the authority to condemn him to the cross, Jesus actually honored him in the conversation that they had with each other. I mean, Jesus very easily could have asserted his power and been like, Pilate, you think you're all that? Watch this. You know, and like Thanos snapped him or something like that, okay? He totally could have done that. But instead, Jesus honored him. And I know this whole conversation about powerful people is tricky because in this room, there's so many different experiences with power. In fact, almost every one of your experiences is unique. But David shows us how we can honor authority in our lives, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And when you choose to respond to authority in this way, here's what happens. You are showing Jesus to the world. That's the end result. Like, you are showing people who God is and how much he cares about them in the way that you choose to honor those, whether they're good or bad authorities over you. So imagine what would happen if you as a teenager figured this out now and started practicing it now. Instead of tearing people down when you disagree with them, you honor them, but still speak the truth about what you feel and what you believe. Imagine what it would be like if you honored the person. You said, you have value because you're created in the image of God, but man, I really disagree with some of the things that you're doing. Like, that's showing Jesus to people. And so I want to challenge you to see power and authority in the way that God used it. Not as top-down control, but a way to serve people and a way to honor people, even when the authority over you is good or even when it's bad.